Well, that's a good time for me to ask you about Brujeria because I remember that coming out and, me being me up here in the Seattle area, a little kid before the internet or anything. Like, I thought you guys were actually like Mexican drug dealers. And then I asked like Chris Elder about it. He's like, what? No, dude, that's Dino from Fear Factory.
Well, the reason why we took on fictitious characters were two reasons. We were at KXLU, which is a college radio station here in California. Our friend was a DJ. His name was Adam Baum. His real name is Pat Hood. He was a DJ there. So he invited us to come down for his final Christmas on-air show, right? And when we were there was a newspaper that said Brujeria really big, right? And it was a Christmas of 1988. And so we saw this newspaper, it said Brujeria, and it showed all this satanic shit.
And for anybody who doesn't know, what does that mean?
It means black magic. So opposite of Santeria, which is white magic. So we saw this newspaper, it said Brujeria really big, and it was talked about this drug cartel that got caught that were satanic drug lords. We were like, wow. We were so intrigued by the story that actually we were like, we need to start a band called that. So on the air, Adam Baum said, there's a new band. They're based out of Matamoros, Mexico, and they're satanic drug lords, and be on the lookout for their new record, right? Which was all fake because we didn't have a record. We hadn't even played a note yet. So we're like, okay, like later in December, we're like, after Christmas, we're like, well, we got to get in the studio and record something. So we did. We recorded a first 7-inch called Demoniaco. So I was on guitar. John Lepe was on drums, which is Juan Brujo. Pat Hood. He was in a punk band. You might have heard of them. They were called Down by Law.
Oh, okay. That's right. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. It's a very non-metal lineup.
He played drums, and Billy Gould from Faith No More played bass.
That's right.
And so that was the four key members. And then we released 3 7-inches before I even put out a Fear Factory record. So, and then every time we did a Fear Factory record, like when Soul of a New Machine came out, Brujeria Matando Gueros came out, which is the first record. Means kill whitey, kill white boys.
Yeah, what were you trying to like? I mean, obviously, like it's funny. It's like it's a funny band, but you were also obviously trying to say something with it. What was kind of the I don't want to say serious, but you're trying to do some social commentary there. What was that side of it?
Well, it was the dark humor. It was the dark humor, and it was all about the California-Mexico border politics. Every mayor, every governor and presidents have tried to use the border in a way to sell their policy or whatever they're trying to do. Trump, obviously, with the wall, everybody's always talked about that, trying to control the border. Then you had the drug cartels trying to control the border as well, because if they control the border, then they can bring their drugs across, whether it's submarines, air, underground, or paying off cops to get through the border. So we were just talking about drug politics. Mexicans dealing with white people and drug politics. The intro is a drug deal gone bad.
Right.
They killed this white guy because, I don't know, he didn't want to pay the money.
Yeah.
I mean, it's dark humor, and that's what it was. But later on, it got to even more political on the second record called Raza Odiada, which means hated race, because we had a governor.
Meaning Chicanos.
Yes. Hated race because they were hating against Mexicanos and what are Chicanos. And so we had a governor named Governor Pete Wilson, and he was trying to pass a law called Proposition 187 or Proposition 87, where they're going to pull you out of school, they're going to pull you out of your work, and they're going to deport you back, and blah blah blah. So
it's very mean spirited,
very Trump, very
just punish. Yeah, just like let's punish.
Rapists. They're sending in rapists, so they're worse people. Blah 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 blah.
And think about how many fucking people that would affect in Southern California.
A lot, like
millions and millions of people, children.
Yes, exactly. And so we looked at it as a very racist way to look at it, So we were like, well, fuck you. This is our record against that, and that's what it's about.
So when did people discover that Brujeria was, where I mean, I'm sure not many people thought you guys were actually like satanic drug dealers like I did when I was 13 or whatever. But when did it sort of get out about your identities?
Well, one of the reasons why we couldn't reveal our identities was because Billy Gould was in a very big contract with Warner Brothers where he couldn't do other outside projects.
Right.
So that's why we didn't reveal our identities. So everybody had fictitious names, and we used, these drug cartel photos of guys who've been in prison, whatever, right?
Right.
Um, uh, so that's why we didn't reveal who we were. But people didn't know for a long time because we kind of kept our mouth shut about it. And unless you knew me, or you knew somebody in the band, you know what I mean, or unless you delivered drugs to the studio or something, you wouldn't know. You know what I mean? Um, but
That's more
yeah,
Brujo.
yeah, we wrote a whole story, right? We didn't do interviews. We just wrote the whole synopsis, the whole story of what the band was about, who we were as characters, and blah blah. And we sent that to the media, and the media was going with that.
Yeah.
So nobody knew. Nobody knew for a while, for a few years.
It's such an interesting kind of preview of the era we live in now, where people just spread fake news, sort of unquestioningly. It's like, I don't know if you intended it as like a comment on how to manipulate the media, but it certainly worked out that way.
Um, well, I wouldn't necessarily say manipulate the media. We just wanted to keep our names and our identities, a secret because, because of Billy. It was really
Right.
all respect to Billy and not wanting to get him in trouble, any kind of legal trouble. So we did it. We had fun with it. It was funny, and I think the media loved it because, they kind of went with it. I think the media started to eventually find out because the record label people were telling them who it was and
I
stuff
see.
like that. Yeah, it's not as dangerous as it seems, and I like to say that, Brujeria and Fear Factory were very groundbreaking bands
Hmm.
that we kind of don't get a lot of credit for,
Yeah.
especially Brujeria, because there was really no other band like it. Or can you
Well, and
think of it?
also
Can you think of
musically, it
it?
was really good too. Like it lived up to the hype.
Yes. And the funny thing is that we would just book studio time and go and write songs. Like each song maybe took an hour to write. You know what I mean? And it was just, you know, working with professional people like Billy Gould and myself, and even Raymond Herrera when he was in the band, and Shane from Napalm Death when he was in
Right.
the band. These guys know how to write songs. So, linking up with those guys, we can write songs on the fly and make them
It's
sound
so
cool.
catchy. It's almost like pop grindcore. You know what I
I
mean?
Yeah, I think that's just the way I write. I like, I'm a sucker for melody. I'm a sucker for a hook, and I just try to make everything I do have some sort of hook, bad or good, but just something that you're going to